These issues with South Korea and Japan, China kind of faced the same thing, an issue with Japan a couple of years ago when it came to forced labor and whatnot. How does the U.S. toe the line between these two allies now?
Well, they're both allies, obviously, and clearly the United States would like them to remain allies. And so I suspect, as you know, our East Asian ambassador, assistant secretary, is going to the region right now to talk with each of them, say, hey, let's cool it, guys. Let's figure out some way we work together. Even though it's a very deep, long-standing issue, comfort women and compensation for comfort. That's a big, big problem. And it's going to continue for quite a while, I'm afraid.
Do they need to get involved, the U.S.? I mean, it's a spat between, as you mentioned, allies.
Well, basically not, no. It's between the two of them. But we don't want to get out of hand. We don't want them to get this inflamed and get them, you know, to the point where it's causing much more difficulty for us. We say, okay, cool it. You got to decide it yourselves. We can't decide it for you, but cool it.
Max, ultimately here, don't we have a position then where we've got these two U.S. allies who are having this tiff? It's a bit deeper than that. Don't want to really, at the moment, lessen what's going on. But we've also got Beijing probably looking at this, and various people at the top there, they're rubbing their hands in glee as they see an alliance, perhaps, with a lot of cracks appearing.
I think that's right. I think they are kind of, happy about it. They want to be too obvious about it, but I think they don't mind seeing Japan and South Korea fighting each other, as it were, in especially two allies of the United States. And add to that, it looks like if Japan follows through with its technology export curbs to South Korea, that's going to also disrupt supply chain, which is going to, in effect, help Huawei and help China.
And on top of that, Max, I mean, we've got this China-US trade war, which is the epicenter of all this, and new words entering the lexicon, such as deglobalization, if that is actually really a word. That's front and center. Where are we with that? Because you were just recently at a conference which was entitled, What Now, What Next? Nobody can answer the latter part of that.
I'm deeply concerned that we're moving somewhat toward a decoupling. That is, the United States is so hard over on Huawei, even though the United States has not produced any hard evidence whatsoever that Huawei has inserted spyware technology on Huawei products, that the U.S. wants to ban Huawei, partly because it fears that Huawei is getting a march on 5G. The U.S. is behind in 5G. I'm worried that that's going to push us more toward decoupling. It should not happen. I hope it doesn't happen, but it's a concern and frankly underlies a lot of the trade tensions we have between our two countries.
That tech issue, the Huawei issue, and of course a broader sort of tech war. I'm curious, how does that resonate domestically in the U.S.? In other words, does that resonate with your regular voter? Because this is all taking place against the backdrop of we are approaching presidential elections, right?
National security is a big deal in the United States. And it began, frankly, with South China Sea, with China building those islands out in the South China Sea. That got a lot of press attention, a lot of TV, and that kind of concerns some Americans. But now we hear about 5G and Huawei, and the concern is that that does compromise U.S. national security. I worry, frankly, that Huawei is being used as a political tool by this administration, trying to whip things up to help them get reelected by showing they're tough in upcoming elections. I don't know, but it's concerning.
Yeah, the former Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, I think a couple of months ago, was flagging the risk that the Chinese were going to delay this and wait for the next administration to deal with the whole trade negotiations. Do you think the Chinese feel now that it's better to deal with President Trump, who is unpredictable but perhaps still wants a deal, or could it change under Democrats if they do get it?
That's a very good question. I think President Xi and the Chinese would not mind seeing Trump reelected, as unpredictable as he is, because he's known unpredictability. And probably a successor, he or she, would probably be a little more firm with China. And that's partly because with the rising China, established U.S. and all that, and the tectonic plates are grinding a little bit more. So the next administration is going to be tougher on China than the past administrations, even if it's not Donald Trump. So I wouldn't be surprised if they would not be too upset with President Trump.
Well, they're back at the table now. they're talking again for the second time. It's a second date, if you will, or a second version. Does that make the hurdle or the bar to walk away higher for both sides, you feel, or is it still the same?
I worry it's still the same because nothing definite came out of Osaka. Different sides have sort of different versions. How much was agreed to that Huawei can buy U.S. high-tech products? We don't know for sure. And then subsequently, China's come back and said, well, a precondition of further talks is the U.S. rolled back all the tariffs. Well, gosh, that's going to be hard to do. So I'm quite worried that it's going to stay where it is. This is the status quo. No rollbacks, no increases. Maybe Huawei get a little bit of break. China be able to buy a lot more soybeans, a lot more soybean exports will go over to China. I'm hopeful, though, that we do more, and we may get a better deal because the closer we get to the election, the more Trump's going to want a deal. He's going to want that stock market to shoot up about 4 or 5 or 6 months before the election, and that's all he really cares about. He cares more about politics than he does policy. He'll do whatever it takes to help his reelection in 2020.
Max, Ambassador, where does this leave us all? Because it's the last yard is always the hardest to come to an agreement. We seem to be 90% there, 95% there before May the 6th. What's actually the stumbling block? Is it an unwillingness, precisely for the reasons you're saying, to do a deal? Because Donald Trump himself has said he's the one who's holding things up. To do a deal before an election in order to be engendering that euphoria you mentioned. So what is the stumbling block right now, if there is one which is tangible as opposed to one which is political?
It's hard to find one that's tangible. I think it's more political. China is becoming more nationalistic. President Xi's feeling a little bit better about his position in China, and he doesn't want to lose face. At the same time, President Trump, we know President Trump. He likes attention. He likes to kind of be the man in charge here. So I think it's more personalities and nationalism and pride than anything else at this point. But I do think both sides really want a deal if they could find a way to do it, because that's we're better off if there is a deal, and certainly Trump would like to have a deal soon before the election.
I was going to get your take on President Trump's Twitter tirade on the UK ambassador, Kim Durock, which ultimately led to his resignation. As a former ambassador, what do you make of all this?
Well, personally, I like to be very careful. You don't say things publicly or anything that might become public. I know, but you still got to be very careful. There are ways to say things confidentially, and there are ways to say things confidentially. Some channels are more likely to get leaked than some others. So if you're going to say something that strong as an ambassador about about the president and the country representing, you got to make sure that it's almost person to person with your boss, rather than going through all the cables and channels, because virtually nothing's secret these days. You got to be really careful.
Yeah, diplomatically, you almost have to. I mean, things do get said behind closed doors, but at the same time, because you're a diplomat, you have to also make sure that it's a very diplomatic way that you're saying it. Was there another option, though, or was it really an eventual resignation? Was there no choice, essentially?
I think there's no choice, because I think the fellow's about to be prime minister doesn't like him, and he's told Trump that, and therefore Trump wants the guy who's going to be prime minister, curry favor with him. And so that's why Trump's made these derogatory statements about him. I think there's no option at this point. How
does it change diplomacy now moving forward here, especially at a time when the U.S. needs allies, needs alliances here to constrain China?
It makes it very difficult. I think what he said is common thought among most ambassadors around the world, except those that are very close. They don't say it publicly, but that's the thought. I run into so many people worldwide who have virtually the same thoughts, frankly. I ran into it today. They say Trump is hurting America. And I don't want to be partisan. I'm just reporting. That's what I hear.